talking about investing in more general terms, obviously it's happened a lot during the last years. Probably COVID was the thing that sparked this interest in investing. And you have Robinhood, you have GameStop, etc. Many viewers and listeners are, I would categorize them as one aspiring investors, want to beat the market, want to have a career in that field. So maybe just to start off, obviously we're talking a lot about the greatness of index funds, but I think it's also important for people to understand that you actually believe in alpha. You believe that there are some people that can outperform the market. So how can we start to wrap this up?
Yeah, so I believe there is alpha. I sadly doubt that any people listening to this day trading have it. It's the old Warren Buffett metaphor that if you get enough thousands of people flipping coins, you're going to get some people that flip heads 10 times in a row. And it doesn't mean they're amazing coin flippers. It just means the laws of probability mean that also in the short run, and sometimes even the long run, some people are going to do amazingly. So if I could invest my money with, maybe there's a max, I'm thinking if I could invest and they'd open their funds for just a personal allocation for Robin Wigglesworth, who would I invest in? And I think it's less than a handful of portfolio managers in the entire world that I feel confident have not just the individual brilliance, because don't forget, individual brilliance is not enough. You need an army of technologists, computer scientists, rocket scientists working with you. The future of investing is teams, process, and culture. And there are some places that have that I would hate to work because it sounds nightmarish. I'm thinking like places like Citadel and Ken Griffin. Citadel is phenomenal long-term track record. He's had some bad years as well. Financial crisis, Citadel nearly went under. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn by saying that Ken Griffin is not probably the most nurturing, kind-hearted boss anybody could ever hope to have. But all he cares about is producing alpha. And anything that might be beta masquerading as alpha, he'll just cut ruthlessly away. He will always, like, if there's a portfolio manager that's doing well, he'll sack them because, well, actually, no, all you did was ride small cap factor. That's all you really did. You didn't produce alpha. You just happened to catch a break and buy some small cap, like heavy small cap exposure at the right time, for example. So he cares about that kind of stuff. Like Medallion, the internal hedge fund at Renaissance Technologies. I mean, this is what has made Jim Simons one of the wealthiest people in the history of mankind. That fund isn't just closed to new investors. It's closed to investors and has been for over a decade because the returns were so good, but the capacity is so limited that it's only there to manage the money of senior executives of Renaissance. I've heard people call the money they get from that, because it's capped at size, they'll move around, they call it dividends, because they're so sure that Medallion will always produce profits. So if I could invest in Medallion, sure. But the numbers on day traders, and nobody likes to hear this because everybody thinks they're brilliant or they're done amazing, and certainly lots of people have done well in the past couple of years, are abysmal. If active professional managers, people that have studied for years of their lives, maybe started trading and investing from they were like 13 and think they can do this, on average suck. Like, they can't beat the market. That's important. People that have dedicated their lives, and fund managers, though I rag on them sometimes, are incredibly smart, hardworking, humble people I respect immensely. They're a million times smarter than I am. And yet they cannot do it consistently. The numbers are unambiguous. But take that and think how much an average everyday person sitting at home can do. I mean, look, every single study from every time period over every country I've looked at this shows unambiguously that day traders routinely over time get their faces ripped off. They are the dumb money who just basically shovel alpha in the way of people like Ken Griffin and Medallion. So there's been one big study in Brazil most recently, which is one of the more comprehensive ones I've seen. And I've seen people say, well, that's just Brazil. But, I don't think people are dumber or smarter there. But it looked at thousands of day traders over a multi-year period. And I think something like 90% of them lost all their money. And 95% of them would have made more money if they'd worked a minimum wage job at McDonald's in Brazil. And then I think 5% of them made more money than they would have done as a bank teller, like an entry-level white-collar job, and only sort of 1% actually made any decent money. And this was over a 3-year period. So I don't want to sound too sort of boring. I've heard people call index funds boomer spam on Reddit, but I'm going to quote Nancy Reagan and just say no when somebody wants you to day trade. When your friends want to do this, put money on football, for God's sake. Liverpool's going to win the league. That's a way surer bet than day trading, YOLOing Tesla options.
That's an intensive speech. I think maybe yes. Maybe the hard part for if you look at the typical day trader, right, sitting on Robinhood, I think maybe the hard part to really understand is the amount of risk they're taking. So they look at their returns, they look at their stocks, they have a narrative, they have a story they can follow on Twitter, they can always find a reason why their stock went up, but they can't maybe wrap their head around the actual risk they're taking.
Yeah, I have to admit, so I spent quite a lot of time on, let's say, Reddit and Wall Street Bets, and there are definitely people there, well, certainly in the early days, that were fairly sophisticated. I mean, we're not talking, it wasn't like Ken Griffin posting, but like people that had worked in the finance industry. Increasingly, I think they've either deliberately or inadvertently taken advantage of a lot of the dumber, greedier money that's followed after them, where the sophistication, their understanding of what's going on is suboptimal, let's say, to non-existence, where they will literally invent fantastical, comically insane conspiracy theories to explain why some of their favorite positions are going down. And we all want narratives, and like, who am I to deny them the thrill of blaming Ken Griffin and short ladder attacks and bond melting for why AMC, cinema chain, an indebted cinema chain in an era of like online streaming, might possibly be going down the drain in the long run. But I find a lot of the analysis around this pretty poor. And yes, I definitely think they do not have a good understanding. And there was obviously one very tragic case of somebody didn't understanding like a double leg option trade and then committing suicide. Now, maybe he was having issues anyway, and it's always tough to spec about things like that. That was definitely the trigger. But, that was isolated. That's an extreme. I don't think we should necessarily, say that, assume that is usual. But yeah, a lot of people don't understand simply like how like vol will affect the price of an option. So, you might have actually put in theory the right trade on from your understanding. You might have put a put on and the stock is falling and you're still losing money for something else that's going on in the market structure you don't understand. And I see this all the time. Like, I bought calls on X and the stock is going up. Why aren't my calls going up 10X? And they just don't understand it. There are smarter people that do this, but people just have to ask themselves, am I the smartest person in trading this stock, this option right now? And with people like Citadel, Jane Street, Goldman, Renaissance, Two Sigma, Millennium on the other side, I think you have to be either a little bit insane or extremely arrogant to think you're the smartest guy that's bought this position. You understand something that the sum collective wisdom of millions of professional investors around the world have just somehow missed. So I feel quite strongly that day trading is dangerous, and if I was world dictator for a day, I'd probably ban it.